Have you ever stopped to wonder how many cases of cervical cancer can be prevented annually with the HPV vaccine? Furthermore, how many lives can be saved with the HPV vaccine? We all have family and friends that can be affected by cervical cancer, and therefore we should promote and we should encourage the HPV vaccine among your loved ones. Cervical cancer is a serious problem with high occurrence and high death rates. A great solution to diminish the occurrence and death rates is to make the HPV vaccine mandatory among young girls entering the public schools. Cervical cancer is a form of cancer that is found in the cervix of a woman and can lead to serious health risks. This can also cause death. According to CBSNews.com, which is a news website that was last visited November 14, 2011, about 6 million women will contract an HPV annually. Out of the 6 million women that will contract an HPV, 10,000 women will be diagnosed with cervical cancer. Out of the 10,000 women that are diagnosed with cervical cancer, according to the National Cervical Cancer Coalition, unfortunately 4,000 will die from it. According to the National Cancer Institute website that was last visited November 15, 2011, cervical cancer caused by HPV accounts for about 5% of all cancers worldwide. A sad but true fact about cervical cancer is that it affects mostly young women. Unfortunately, the age for the occurrence rates of cervical cancer is under 35 years old, and this is according to cancerhealth.org. HPV stands for human papillomavirus, and it's an infection transmitted through sexual contact, and there are about 40 different types of HPV. There are 2 different risk levels of HPV. There is a high risk and a low risk level. The high risk level are the primary cause for cervical cancer. A thing about HPV is that there are no symptoms, so the woman can have an HPV for many years before realizing that she has an HPV. The reason this is a problem is because it delays treatment, which can cause the death of a woman if left untreated. A great solution to diminish the levels of death and the rates of cervical cancer occurrence is to make the HPV vaccine mandatory for young girls entering the public schools. There are 2 types of HPV vaccines that can be administered to the young girls. According to the FDA, the 2 types of HPV vaccines are Gardasil and Cervarix. Both Gardasil and Cervarix are highly effective in preventing HPV, especially the 2 types of HPV that are the main cause for cervical cancer. Those 2 types of HPV are type 16 and type 18, which cause about 70% of cervical cancers, according to CDC.gov. Making the vaccine mandatory among young girls will decrease cervical cancer cases, especially among young women. The typical age for young girls to be vaccinated ranges from 9 years old to 26 years old. Most vaccines are covered by insurance plans, and also the reason for girls to be vaccinated at such a young age is because it is better if the girl hasn't been introduced to an HPV prior to the vaccination. It is believed that girls at 9 years of age are less sexually active than girls that are teenagers or older than that. Once the girl acquires an HPV in her body, the HPV vaccine will become obsolete and the girl will have no need for it because it won't help her prevent cervical cancers since she's already been introduced to HPV prior to that. In conclusion, as you're all aware, cervical cancer is a serious problem, but it can be helped by having girls vaccinated before entering the public schools. If this is mandatory, it can help decrease the levels of occurrence and the levels of death rates of cervical cancer. This is a great solution to help save lives. This can help decrease the amount of women that are diagnosed with cervical cancer annually. And remember that anyone can be diagnosed with HPV or cervical cancer regardless of their age, regardless of their sexual preference, or regardless of their ethnicity. It's a great way to save lives if we could just promote and encourage HPV vaccinations, especially among the young girls who are entering the public schools who have not been introduced to an HPV in their bodies yet.